Hey everybody, this is Mr. W. Our lesson today is on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. For example, 3/10 and 2/5. If you look at the bottom number or the denominators, you'll notice that they're not alike, they're unlike. 3/10 has tenths and 2/5, the bottom is fifths. So in math, there's three rules for adding and subtracting fractions like this. The first rule is that the bottom numbers must be the same. So for example, 3/10, 2/5, which is rewritten here, can't add that the way that is because that's breaking our first rule. But the second rule is that we are allowed to make them the same. And how we do that is we're going to use something called least common denominator. It's very similar to least common multiple. If you're not sure about that, there's another lesson that you can look at and watch for that and maybe come back and then finish this. But basically, we're doing multiples of the bottom number. So for example, 3/10 plus 2/5 I cannot do, so I'm going to find some multiples of 10. Usually just have to write a few. I just write about 3 to get started. So 10, 20, 30. For fifths, 5, 10, and right away I can see my 10 here. So my least common denominator is 10. So my job is to multiply, it's rule 3, and the goal is to make this into tenths. So in other words, what am I going to multiply 10 to get tenths? Well, I'll show you a little trick. When you look at your multiples here, it's the first one. So in other words, we're just going to multiply by 1. So 3 times 1 would be 3, and then 10 times 1, 3/10. On the bottom, what do we multiply 5 by to get 10? Well, here's a little trick. 1, 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And 5 times 2 on the bottom would be 10. Notice now that we're meeting rule 1, we have the bottom number is the same, and we are allowed to go ahead and add now. 3 plus 4 would be 7, and then they are 10, so our answer would be 7/10. When you add and subtract fractions, we could show that in a model. Think of it quickly this way, is that if you had 2 apples and 3 oranges, if you were to add that up, you wouldn't say that you had 5 apples, because that wouldn't be true. And you wouldn't say that you have 5 oranges, but you would find something in common, and both of them are fruit. So in this case, you could say, well, we have 5 pieces of fruit. You're looking for something in common, and fractions is similar. We're looking for something in common. So if I have 1/5, and I want to add that to 3/10, I don't say that I have 1, 2, 3, 4/5. That would be similar to this example here. It just doesn't magically turn into one into the other. So what we do is we find something in common. And that's what those 3 rules are. In this case, we would just multiply the 5 to make it tenths. And it would be 5 times 2. So showing that in model form, the 1/5 would change into tenths. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/10. So that's one way to look at what we're doing today. Solve, add, or subtract the fractions. Keep in mind our 3 rules down here for doing that. I'm going to rewrite. Let's find it a little bit easier. 6/12, subtract 2/6. And right away I notice the first thing I check is our denominator on the bottom, and they are not the same. So my job is rule 2 is to make them the same, and I can do that by doing multiples. Well, right away when I see this, I'm looking at my 6, and I know that 6, if multiplied by 2, will equal 12. So I'm just going to write 12 over here. That's all I'm going to need. And then for 6, you would say 6, the next multiple would be 12. And you can see that we have our common multiple of 12. Now my job is to, for rule 3, is to multiply with the goal of making it 12. Well, how does 12 equal 12? Well, that's easy. We just multiply that by 1. And like the little trick I showed, you just have to count one time. 6 times 1 on the top would be 6. And 12 times 1 for your denominator. There you go. On the bottom, what times 6 equals 12? Well, that would be 1, 2. 2 times 2, 4. And 6 times 2, 12. Now we are good to subtract because our denominator is the same. 6 minus 4 is 2. And then we have 12, so 2 twelfths. And one more, 2 fourths plus 1/3. And right away I see that fourths and thirds are not equivalent. So I'm going to find some multiples of 4. 4, 8, 12. Multiples of 3, 3, 6, 9. I'm not really seeing any multiples here. Let's try one more. And yes, here we go, 12. So interesting, we got 12 again. Rule 3 is we're going to multiply to make 12. Well, it's going to be 1, 2, 3. A little bit tight here. 2 times 3 would equal 6. And 4 times 3 on the bottom, 6 twelfths. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because 3 times 4 would equal 12. So we're going to multiply by 4. 1 times 4 is 4. And 3 times 4 would be 12. And now we can see that our bottom number, our denominator, is the same, which means that we're allowed to add. 6 plus 4 on the top would be 10. And then we know that we have twelfths here. All right, well, everybody, hope that was helpful today. Remember, our topic today is adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. The 3 rules is that remember that your bottom numbers must be the same. If they're not the same, your job is to make them the same using your least common denominator, in other words, multiples. And then the final step is that you want to multiply your fractions to make them match your least common denominator. We just showed you some tricks for that. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.